Most men think protection means locking the doors at night, paying the bills, or walking her safely to her car. And while all of that matters, what so many miss is that the safety she longs for isn't always physical, it's emotional. It's spiritual. It's felt in how you speak to her, how you look at her, and how you respond when she's most exposed. Because here's the truth: a woman can live in a beautiful house, drive a nice car, and still feel completely unsafe in the presence of the man who provides it all. Because safety isn't just what you offer externally, it's how you hold her internally. She's not just asking, "Will you protect me from the world?" She's wondering, "Can I be myself around you and not be punished for it?" She's watching how you respond when she's not her best, when she's moody, anxious, or uncertain. Does your energy make her feel like she's too much, too emotional, too inconvenient? Because the moment a woman feels like she has to shrink herself to keep your peace, she's no longer safe. She's just silent. Safety for her means being able to come undone without being made to feel unworthy. It means being able to cry and not be called dramatic, to speak and not be labeled disrespectful, to disagree without being dismissed. That's the kind of safety that gets overlooked, because it isn't grand or loud. It's subtle. It's in the way you breathe when she enters the room. It's in whether your tone calms her or makes her flinch. It's in whether your silence is grounding or terrifying. When a woman doesn't feel emotionally safe, she starts editing herself. She stops asking for things. She stops sharing her thoughts. She stops initiating conversations, not because she doesn't care, but because she's measuring the cost of honesty against the weight of your reaction. So instead of telling you what she feels, she tells herself, "Don't make it a big deal, let it go." But over time, every moment she has to let it go becomes a moment she lets go of you, not all at once, but gradually, quietly, and you won't even know it's happening. Until one day, she no longer looks at you with those soft eyes. Until one day, her laughter doesn't reach as far, and you're left wondering what changed, never realizing it wasn't her. It was the environment you unknowingly created. There's a difference between a man who protects her body and one who protects her heart. One shows up when things go wrong. The other shows up before they do, by creating a space where she feels safe enough to be real, flawed, feminine, and human. And that kind of safety doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence, from patience, from the kind of listening that doesn't rush to fix but stays to understand. Because the truth is, many women are tired of being strong, tired of wearing the armor, tired of being the one who holds it all together. What she desires, what she aches for, is a man who says, "You don't have to carry everything alone." A man who doesn't make her pay for her softness with silence. A man who reminds her that tenderness isn't a weakness, it's a gift, but she'll only offer that gift to someone who's proven they'll protect it. If you really want to know what makes a woman feel safe, start with consistency. Not just in action, but in attitude. Be the same man when she's glowing and when she's grieving. Let her feel that your love doesn't vanish when her mood shifts. Let her see that your stability isn't shaken by her storm. Because when she realizes that your presence can hold her without hurting her, she'll open herself in ways even she didn't know she could. And that's when connection deepens, not when you impress her, but when you see her. Not when you rescue her, but when you reassure her. Not when you lead her, but when you make it safe enough for her to rest. Because at the end of the day, every woman wants to feel protected, but only the ones who feel safe will truly stay. You ever notice how often the strongest women are the most overlooked emotionally, not because they're invisible, but because they're so good at surviving, no one stops to ask if they're actually okay. They carry the weight, hold the family together, smile through the pressure, and still show up with grace. And yet, somewhere along the way, people start mistaking her resilience for contentment, as if strength means she doesn't feel pain. As if independence means she doesn't need support, as if being capable means she doesn't want to be cared for. But here's the truth: she longs to be seen beyond the strength, beyond the performance, beyond the version of herself the world applauds. Because even the strongest woman has moments when she's tired of being the one everyone leans on. She wants someone to lean into her, not just when she's shining, but when she's silently unraveling inside. When she tells you she's fine, sometimes it's not because she is. It's because she's learned that being strong makes people stop asking. So she puts on the armor before you can see the cracks. She hides her softness because past experiences taught her that being vulnerable got her abandoned or misunderstood. And yet, deep down, all she really wants is someone who sees past the mask and whispers, "You don't have to hold it all together with me." The world praises her grind, but forgets her grief. It claps for her power, but misses her pain. And that's where you have the opportunity to stand out, not by fixing her, but by noticing her, by catching the moments when her energy shifts, by listening to what she's not saying, by understanding that her strength doesn't mean she doesn't still desire to be held, to be chosen, to be poured into. You see, the more independent a woman appears, the more her soul is asking for safety. The more she says, "I've got it," the more her heart is quietly hoping someone will say, "You don't have to," and not because she's weak, not because she can't do it herself, but because the deepest form of intimacy isn't dependency. It's being strong and still wanting someone close enough to soften with, and most men miss that. They confuse her confidence with emotional distance. They fall in love with her strength and then punish her for not being more submissive. But she's not asking you to break her down. She's hoping you'll lift her up by seeing the parts of her she hides from everyone else. Her strength isn't a wall, it's a test. It's asking, "Can you love me when I'm not easy to hold? Can you see the little girl inside the grown woman? Can you make space for my complexities without making me feel like I'm too much?" Because when you do that, when you love her beyond what she shows, you unlock a version of her that's been waiting for a safe place to land. She wants to be admired for her brilliance, but she also wants to be embraced when she's exhausted. She wants you to celebrate her confidence, but also cherish her moments of doubt. She wants to be told she's beautiful in the chaos, not just in the calm. That's the kind of love that penetrates the soul. That's the kind of presence that makes her say, "I can finally exhale here." And the irony is, the moment you stop trying to match her strength and start honoring her softness, she becomes even stronger. Not because she has to, but because she wants to. Because now she knows she's not fighting alone. Because now she feels seen, not just for what she does, but for who she is when she's not performing. So don't just admire the woman who shows up boldly. Learn to love the version of her that's quiet, that's uncertain, that's healing, because the loudest part of her might be the most obvious, but the softest part of her is where her deepest truth lies. And if you can truly see her there, in the shadows behind her strength, you'll earn a kind of loyalty that can't be bought, only felt, the kind that only comes when a woman knows she's finally been seen. It's easy to assume that giving her everything she needs means buying gifts, paying bills, planning vacations, or handling responsibilities. But what so many men miss is that provision without presence often feels like absence wrapped in effort. Because while she might appreciate the things you do for her, what she truly desires, what reaches the deepest parts of her soul is you, your undivided attention, your full presence, your ability to sit still with her without checking the time or looking at your phone and just be. She doesn't just want the man who provides the house. She wants the man who builds a home in his presence, a place she can return to emotionally, a space where she doesn't feel like she has to compete with your work, your distractions, or the weight of your ambitions. Because when a woman says she feels alone in a relationship, it's rarely about physical space, it's about emotional distance. It's about being in the same room, but feeling like you're miles away. It's about talking and yet not being heard. It's about loving someone who's always doing, but never being. She desires presence over provision because your time speaks louder than your transactions. She remembers how you made her feel in the quiet moments far more than the grand ones. She treasures the nights you listened without fixing, the mornings you reached for her hand before your phone, the random check-ins that said, "I see you," even when you're not asking to be seen. That's what stays with her. That's what builds the kind of bond that outlasts surface level love. Because when you're truly present, she can breathe, she can rest. She no longer has to guess where she stands with you. She doesn't need constant reassurance, because your presence alone is the reassurance. It says, "I'm here, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, fully." And that kind of presence is rare. That kind of presence is unforgettable. The thing is, it's easy to get caught up in the belief that success will prove your love. That working harder, making more money, doing more will make her feel chosen. But what she's craving isn't your hustle, it's your heart. And sometimes your desire to provide can unintentionally become the very thing that takes you away from her. You end up pouring into everything around her, but not into her, and while she may not complain at first, while she may say she understands, deep down, a silent gap begins to form, not because she's ungrateful, but because she's hungry. Hungry for your attention, hungry for your laughter, hungry for the man who used to hold her longer, talk to her deeper, look at her slower, and if that hunger stays unmet, she begins to starve emotionally. Not loudly, not dramatically, but gradually her energy starts to fade, her effort starts to decline, and then one day you look at her and wonder where the connection went, never realizing it faded in all those moments you thought your provision was enough. But it's never been about how much you give, it's about how present you are when you give nothing but yourself. Because no amount of money, no luxury, no grand gesture can replace the warmth of a man who listens, the safety of a man who notices, the peace of a man who shows up, not just for the big moments, but for the small ones, the in-between ones, the ones where she simply needs you to be there, not as a provider, but as a partner. She desires presence because that's where love lives, not in the doing, but in the being. And when a man learns to sit with her in stillness, to love her with his focus, to make her feel like time stops when she's speaking, that's when she feels most valued, most chosen, most seen. And the beautiful part is, presence doesn't cost a thing, but its absence costs everything, because you can lose a woman while trying to give her the world when all she ever needed was you. There's something deeply misunderstood about what women want when they say they're looking for a man who leads, because leadership to her is not about dominance. It's not about being told what to do, how to feel, or who to become. What she yearns for isn't control, it's emotional leadership, a kind of guidance rooted in stability, not superiority, a man who doesn't lead with pressure but with presence, one who holds himself with enough discipline to steady her, not suppress her. She doesn't need a dictator, she needs a safe compass, someone whose clarity gives her room to soften, not someone whose commands make her shut down. And there's a very real difference between a man who tries to control her emotions and one who leads with his own. One imposes his will, the other influences with calm. One is driven by fear, the other by security. A woman thrives in the presence of a man who knows how to regulate his own emotions, not someone who blames her for his anger, not someone who uses silence as punishment or explodes when things don't go his way, but a man who leads himself first, a man who can hear something uncomfortable without becoming defensive, who can hold tension without escalating it, who can love her even when she's hard to love, because he's grounded enough to respond, not just react. That's the leadership she desires, emotional strength, not emotional manipulation, direction without domination. A presence that doesn't silence her voice, but makes her feel safe enough to use it. Because if a woman has to choose between her peace and your control, she will always move toward peace eventually. And when she does, it's not because she didn't love you. It's because she couldn't breathe around you anymore. You see, real leadership in a relationship means being the emotional thermostat, not the thermometer. It means setting the tone, not just reading the room. She's not asking you to have all the answers, but she is watching how you carry yourself when things get uncertain. Do you collapse? Do you blame? Or do you become the calm in the chaos? Because when a woman senses that your emotional climate changes based on pressure, she stops trusting your leadership. She may still stay, but she'll stop following because her spirit won't surrender to instability. And here's where it gets deeper. She wants to follow, but only when it feels safe to, only when your direction comes from love, not ego, only when she sees that your decisions aren't about control, but about care. She's not resisting your leadership. She's resisting the version of it that feels like control in disguise, the version that shames her emotions instead of embracing them, that calls her too much instead of asking, what's really going on underneath that reaction? And if you can't lead yourself through her vulnerability, you can't expect her to hand you her heart, because her heart doesn't open to force. It opens to safety, and safety is created when your energy says, I've got you, and not do it my way. It's when she knows you'll remain rooted even when she's unraveling. It's when you show her, again and again, that your love doesn't disappear when she's emotional, it deepens. That's when she starts to surrender, not out of fear, but out of trust. Not because she has to, but because she wants to, because she feels guided, not guarded, because your leadership doesn't feel like a cage, it feels like a covering, a shield, a direction home, and that kind of leadership invites her into her softness, into her natural desire to pour back into the man who leads her with love. So if you want to lead a woman, start by leading yourself through your own anger, through your own pride, through your own past. Because the more you master your inner world, the more she'll feel safe in your outer one. And when she feels that, she won't resist your lead. She'll rise with it, because emotional leadership doesn't overpower her. It empowers you both. There's a side of her that many men see but few truly understand, the side that's soft, nurturing, warm, and calm, the part of her that brings stillness to a chaotic world, that listens without rushing, that loves without conditions, and that gives without keeping score. But the tragedy is, over time, many begin to take that peace for granted. They grow used to her gentleness. They stop noticing the way she brings light into dark rooms, how she diffuses tension with patience, how she sacrifices her own needs just to hold things together. And eventually, that peace gets mistaken for passivity. That softness is no longer appreciated, it's simply tolerated, and the very energy that once drew him in becomes the energy he no longer protects. She wants to be the peace you protect, not the fire you tolerate, because yes, she has both inside her, and the way you treat her peace determines which one you get. You see, no woman stays soft in a space where softness is mishandled. When she feels unseen, unheard, or emotionally unguarded, that calmness begins to erode, and slowly she transforms, not because she wants to, but because she has to, because peace that is not protected becomes pain. And pain left unattended turns into fire, into frustration, into defensiveness, into silence that screams louder than any argument ever could. She starts out wanting to be your calm. She enters hoping to be your rest. She gives her heart, thinking it will be cherished, only to find herself holding a love that isn't met with the same depth. And so what was once peaceful now feels heavy. What was once nurturing now feels neglected. Because even the most graceful woman grows weary when her peace is constantly tested instead of honored. And here's what many men miss. She didn't become distant overnight. That fire you now feel wasn't always there. It was built slowly, brick by brick, from every moment she had to suppress herself just to keep things from falling apart. Every time she swallowed her words to avoid conflict. Every time she let a wound go unspoken, thinking maybe it would just fade. But wounds that aren't acknowledged don't disappear. They deepen, and eventually that fire you tolerated becomes the very storm that leaves you wondering where the softness went. What she needs isn't perfection, but protection. A man who knows how to see the quiet beauty in her effort. A man who doesn't dismiss her concerns as complaints. A man who recognizes that her peace is not just a gift, it's a responsibility. Because to be loved by a woman who brings calm to your life is a blessing. But to keep that love, you must protect what made it special in the first place. She's not asking you to never make mistakes. She's not demanding constant praise or perfection. What she's craving is your presence. Your awareness, your willingness to say, I see how much you do. I feel your love. I honor your peace. And I'll never treat it like it's guaranteed. Because when a woman feels that, she blossoms, her peace expands. Her love deepens, and she'll pour into you in ways you didn't even know you needed, because she feels safe enough to. But when her efforts are met with indifference, when her energy is drained trying to maintain what only two people can carry, she starts to retreat. Not dramatically, not with screaming or slamming doors, but with small withdrawals, with conversations that no longer flow, with eyes that no longer light up, with touches that no longer linger, until one day she's gone, not physically, maybe, but emotionally. And by then, her peace has already been burned out by the fire you never thought she'd light. So the choice is yours. You can cherish the calm she offers, or you can wait until it turns into a storm that forces you to realize what you lost. Because peace isn't loud. It won't fight for attention, but once it leaves, its absence echoes louder than any chaos ever could. And the man who understands this, who chooses to protect her peace as if it were his own, that's the man who never has to fear the fire. She doesn't need grand gestures every day. She's not asking for constant fireworks or dramatic declarations of love. What she hopes for, what she quietly aches for, is to be chosen daily in the small things, in the simple acts, in the way your eyes still search for hers across the room, the way your voice softens when she's tired, the way your hand reaches for hers not because you have to, but because you want to. That's the kind of choosing that matters. That's what makes her feel safe in love, because desire without consistency, that feels like rejection dressed up in passion. It's easy to chase a woman when everything is new, when the chemistry is fresh and her laughter is still a mystery. But what reveals your character, what shows her how deeply she's loved, is what you do when the newness fades, when the routine settles in. When life gets loud, that's when the real test begins. Will you still pursue her heart when it no longer feels like a challenge? Will you still lean in when life tempts you to lean away? Because for her, consistency is not just comfort, it's confirmation. It tells her you're not just here for what she gives, you're here for who she is. It tells her she's not just loved in moments of intimacy, but in the in-between spaces too, when she's busy, when she's quiet. When she's not at her best, she watches how you treat her in those moments, not to test you, but to understand you, because any man can say the right words, but she listens for what your patterns reveal. And if your pursuit only shows up when you want something, she begins to question whether she was ever truly chosen, or simply convenient, and it doesn't take much. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to read her mind or move mountains. It's in the check-in text just because. It's in remembering that small detail she casually mentioned last week. It's in asking how her day was and really listening to her answer. Those things might feel small to you, but to her they mean everything. Because they show that love isn't something you just declared once. It's something you live. You see, women are intuitive. They feel when love is fading, when presence becomes performance, when effort turns into obligation. And even if she doesn't say it out loud, something inside her begins to shut down when she feels forgotten, when the man who once looked at her like she was the only one in the room now barely glances up from his screen. When touch becomes routine, when the "I love you" becomes habit, not heartbeat, that's when her heart starts to drift, not because she stopped loving you, but because she stopped feeling loved by you. And once that happens, rebuilding her trust takes more than promises. It takes presence. It takes effort. It takes the humility to say, "I lost sight of you, and I want to choose you again," not just in words, but in how I show up. Because love is not a one-time commitment. It's a daily decision, a rhythm, a practice, and when she sees that you're willing to show up consistently, not just when things are good, not just when it's easy, but even when it's hard, when you're tired, when you're tempted, that's when she knows it's real. And the beautiful thing is, when she feels chosen, she flourishes. She becomes more affectionate, more confident, more open, because when a woman feels secure in your consistency, she stops wondering if she's enough and starts pouring even more of her love into you. Not from fear, but from fullness, and that kind of love, that's what creates something lasting, something rooted, something both of you can grow in. So if you love her, don't just say it, show her daily. In your tone, in your time, in your tenderness, because no matter how strong she is, no matter how secure she may seem, she still needs to be reminded you still choose her. And when you do, over and over again, she'll give you a version of herself no one else will ever get to see.